Well, good morning. Thank you so much for being with us here on a Monday, starting off another great week here in Hawaii. I'm Yanji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalesuji, and this is the COVID-19 Care Conversation.
That's right. We want to welcome all of you tuning in here. We've made it to another week here together as we continue on in discussion and helping connect you, the readers of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser, with our local leaders. Today, of course, we will be speaking once again to Governor David Ige, who will be talking about some of the updates from the state side, as well as some of the plans moving forward and how Hawaii will continue to roll out and open its economy and some of the businesses that are slowly getting back to work. We, of course, want to thank our sponsors, the Hawaii Executive Collaborative, as well as Hawaii Pacific Health, for making this conversation possible and for allowing us the opportunity to continue in this dialogue and help giving you the resources and information that you need to help get you through this very unprecedented time. And as we always like to do, we like to start off with the count. More good news over the weekend, Yanji.
Yeah, fantastic news. 4 cases in total, 3 on Saturday, 1 reported on Sunday. No new deaths to report. So 17 deaths so far since the pandemic began in Hawaii. And, single digits for about 3 weeks now, which is incredible. Friday, of course, we saw no new cases. That was tremendous to see. And nearly 90% of the people who have been infected have been released. So that also is great news to see.
That's right. Great numbers to see. We'll continue to see if we can keep those numbers down as things begin opening up once again. Still a lot of questions about how Hawaii recovers. There's discussion about diversifying Hawaii's economy right now. There's a great article that's in the Star-Advertiser. We'll talk a little bit more about that, including the legislature being back in session today to sort of address some of these concerns and the budget issues. And right now, at this time, we'd like to bring in Governor Ige to kind of talk more about some of those things that are happening. Good morning, Governor. Great to see you again. Let's first start off there with the legislature being back in session today to sort of handle and fix maybe some of the shortfalls that we're seeing with the budget. Is there anything specific that you are hoping the legislature does and passes or some of the implementations that they're going to try to do that will help you in this effort as well as the state?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Yanji, for having me back again. There's a couple of things that are really important that they're going to be doing. The first is the Treasury actually has this loan program that allows states to borrow money at very, very low cost and low interest. And we can, borrow like $2 billion if we really needed to. So that's an important option we want to have, right? We want to avoid layoffs. We want to avoid reducing salaries of public servants. So that ability to borrow from the Treasury may become very important, but I need to have authorization from the legislature in order for me to do that. And it would cause us to exceed the expenditure ceiling. As you know, we have a very fiscally conservative constitution, and we are required to have a balanced budget. But not only that, we actually have an expenditure ceiling. And if we exceed the ceiling, then we actually have to declare it publicly so everybody knows. And in addition, it does require a 2/3 majority to pass anything that exceeds the ceiling. So that's the real, fundamentally the most important thing that the legislature will be doing. They're also, we've been working on the CARES Act fund, so they're going to be talking a little bit about the pots of expenditures we anticipate making out of the CARES money that the state is getting. I will be turning over about $170+ million to the counties. Honolulu got funds directly from the federal government for CARES, but Hawaii County, Maui County, and Kauai County did not get any direct CARES money. So I'll be giving each of those counties a share of the funds that the state gets. And we're making other appropriations from that money, to improve screening at the airports, to directly handle some of the costs that directly involved with the COVID-19 response, and other appropriations that helps us deal with the COVID pandemic.
Seeing a lot of questions about visitors. I know there's plenty of concerns Just to give people some context, before the pandemic, we had about 30,000 visitors on a daily basis. On Friday, I think we saw the largest number since this restriction began. I think it was around 200, which for a lot of people is still 200 too many. How do you feel about how it's going when it comes to tracking these visitors, making sure that the quarantine is actually abided by? Peely has a question. Can you eliminate the potential residence question on the airport questionnaire? There are loopholes that we're seeing that visitors can take advantage of, and then not have to do the 14-day quarantine. So what steps are being done to make sure that that's being followed, and what more do you think can be done?
Well, just to clarify, there's not really a loophole. All incoming have to do a quarantine. Obviously, residents would quarantine at home. If you're a visitor, then we ask you for what your hotel accommodations are, and we are actually confirming that. So everyone who comes in has to quarantine unless you have an essential business, or you're an essential person that is doing essential business. So everyone is required to quarantine. We are closing the loopholes, working with the counties to do better enforcement. We are thinking about different things that can allow us to do a better job. One of the challenges, we're not capturing a photo, for example, right? So if we know someone has broken quarantine, we don't have a photo that we can distribute and have people help us to identify who they are. The other big challenge is many states have implemented a quarantine all across the country, but nobody's really implementing it. So someone might have been traveling in Montana, for example, and they actually do have a 14-day mandatory quarantine, but it doesn't mean anything. They don't have to do anything differently. The state of Montana has not implemented anything. So many of these visitors coming in, they think it's the same thing. It's no big deal. Yeah, I came from a state that had a quarantine. It didn't mean anything. So emphasizing that it's different. We've had a very good cooperation from Hawaiian Airlines, Alaska Airlines, and they are informing everyone when they book their flight or when they're thinking about booking a flight that a quarantine is required. And they describe the quarantine, right? So if you come here, you have to stay in your room. You can't leave your room for any reason at all, period. You can't go to the pool or any accommodation at the hotel. You have to have meals brought to you. When people really understand what the quarantine means, they choose not to come. But the other airlines have refused to provide that same notification to those booking flights. So, again, we're working with the airlines. We know that in order for us to move forward, this has to be a partnership with the state of Hawaii, the counties, the airline industry, the hotel industry, and everyone in our community to really make the hospitality industry work post-COVID-19.
So is photo taking something that you guys are looking at, or taking pictures of these visitors so you can recognize them? Is that one of the options now that you're thinking at?
Yeah, that's part of it. Ryan, we are putting them, we have an app now. We have a website. They can register themselves. We put in where they're staying and all of that information. And we have their names, right? Because they have to provide us their ID, and we make sure it jives. But we don't have a photo. So we are talking about capturing that. When in the screening process would we be able to do that? All of those kinds of improvements, I think, would be helpful. And we continue to work with the counties to, I sent a letter to the Chief Justice asking that they establish a standard penalty for anyone caught violating, a minimum of $2,000 fine on the first offense. Those kinds of things, trying to get implemented so that any visitor understands that this is a public health emergency. Them being out and about is a risk to our community, and our quarantine is real, and they need to abide by it.
I think a lot of people just feel pretty frustrated. What is the best course of action in terms of a resident? What should they do? Should they be, if we see somebody violating this quarantine, I see a lot of people who say, my neighbor runs an Airbnb, or, I've seen a visitor at the beach. what do you suggest they do? Is this a situation where we call 911? I mean, if there's no sort of standard, what do we do?
Well, we are working to have a number that people can call at. We're trying to integrate right now. HTA is involved with us, and we do have all the names of everyone who is required to quarantine. We're trying to connect that to law enforcement. Remember, if you're a resident and you come back, you're required to quarantine at home, which means that you shouldn't be leaving your residence either. So, all of those kinds of things are improvements that we can make to ensure that the quarantine is meaningful and enforceable.
Governor, over the weekend, we saw a lot of people heading outdoors, and we know that the safer at home order that you set in place allows people to go to some of these essential businesses, of course, maybe some retail shops that have opened. I want to bring up this photo. This was a scene at Kaimana Beach over the weekend. Clearly, a lot of people traveling outside of their household unit, going to the beaches. There were reports of these people running into the water when police came by. So these were the scenes like this over the weekend. Of course, Mother's Day was yesterday. But could the state move to the expanding of the stay-at-home order and safer-at-home order to maybe the 10 or less group gatherings, so that it's not necessarily these people who feel like they are breaking the law and they're legally able to gather outside of their household unit?
Yeah, so Ryan, as we look at relaxing and phasing in the three components, and we talked a lot about quarantine. So, inter-island quarantine, domestic quarantine, and international quarantine is one of the real important components of our stay-at-home, safer-at-home order. The second component deals with businesses and organizations and which ones are high risk and which are low risk. We've tried to allow the low-risk businesses to reopen. We'll be getting to medium risk and high risk. So that's just the business activity itself. And then the third really important component of the social distancing and the response is gatherings, right? And right now we're saying no gatherings of any size, social gatherings is allowed. And so the next phase we would probably talk about gatherings of 10 or less, and allowing that to occur. And then the next step after that would probably be 25 to 50, depending. And, each of those steps introduces more risk for someone who has the virus infecting a lot more people and then spreading the virus throughout our community.
I saw a question back here. I want to get to it. It's just a real easy one, and that is Iliahi Curtis saying, will you extend beyond May 31st? What's our time frame for this safe at home, safer at home? How long will we be in this circumstance?
Yeah, so certainly I think that there will be we will be relaxing the standards again, assuming that we don't see a spike. And, we're 1 week into the relaxing and we haven't seen any significant changes in the number of positive cases. So we would be looking at beyond May 31st of another relaxing to try and allow for medium risk and potentially higher risk businesses, as well as that whole issue I told you about gathering sizes, maybe allowed 10 or more to 10 or less to gather, and then, a further expansion beyond that. But certainly we are in discussions to see a relaxation, probably looking at May 31st.
Okay, great. Another question, this one just coming in, and again, a repeat one from Evan. When will the inter-island quarantine be lifted? We know that you had said in the past that likely that will be lifted before the overall quarantine for all visitors coming in. But what about the inter-island? Is there a specific time frame or a date that maybe you might be targeting to see when that would be lifted? No,
again, so, Ryan, we are looking at that right now. Be talking with the mayors in a little while to talk about inter-island. Part of the whole notion was trying to, we know that the incidence of the virus on virtually any island is very low. I just got off a call with the vice president and the national task force, and the CDC and the WHO recognize any infection rate of 10% or lower, meaning that you've done a good job. In Hawaii, the infection rate is 1.8%, so it is super low. So our belief is that there isn't a whole lot of virus circulating. So inter-island travel is definitely a step that we would look at. My guess is that we're looking in, between now and maybe 2 weeks to 6 weeks from now, looking at some place in that interval, allowing for inter-island travel. And it might be, so part of that is we're reinventing the whole hospitality industry. We're asking hotels to do a better job of sanitation, as well as managing and encouraging visitors to understand what their responsibility is as a visitor. So the whole notion as part of this phasing is how do we get our local economy going, but also looking at encouraging staycations and people taking neighbor island trips so that they can experience the new hotels and understand what systems and processes put in place so that they can feel more comfortable as we start talking about domestic and international travel.
Mary's got a question, and it kind of touches on that big article in the paper we were talking about today. Mary Cadiz saying, do you think Hawaii can thrive without tourism? If possible, how? I mean, there is a real question if tourism, domestic, not necessarily inter-island travel, but tourism from the mainland and beyond, if that is postponed for any more significant amount of time, we have to find an alternate source of income. So Mary's question is a good one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that we are looking at how we can be more resilient and self-reliant, right? I mean, the whole notion that suddenly there's lots of local produce and products available because they're not selling them to restaurants and the hotels. I think it really highlights maybe how much progress we've made. We used to import 90% of the food. Suddenly the local farmers recognize that 40 to 50% of what they produce now really goes to hotels and the hospitality industry. So, I mean, I think that's a great statement, but it's also, we know that if we can be more self-reliant and grow more of the food that we eat, and instead of sending our dollars out of state to create jobs someplace else, we can create those jobs here and create more economic activity. Mary's point, I think, is well taken, and I think we are all re-examining, should we be more picky about the visitors we try and attract here? Is 10 million too much? What would be a more appropriate number? And we've all lived with, the bottlenecks and the slowdowns on the North Shore of Oahu, Haiena on North Shore of Kauai. When we had the flooding and shut down the road, residents actually could utilize many of those locations that they couldn't before. So we do know we want to have that conversation. I don't believe that we can really have a thriving economy without the visitor industry. So we have to reinvent it in a way that enhances our citizens' life, but also delivers a better experience for the visitor so that it can be a win-win for everybody involved.
Another concern is the releasing of prisoners during this time. And one of the questions that we had is, what are your thoughts on the Attorney General calling to halt or at least pause the court-mandated push to release these inmates from the correctional facilities here in the state?
As you know, Ryan, I really, we raised the whole issue when we first started this process. We acknowledged that we needed to get the prison population lowered just because of the potential spread of COVID-19 in our prison systems. But we insisted that every single inmate considered for release, we should do a really in-depth, comprehensive review of who they are, and most importantly, what risk would they pose to our community. We did not want to see this happen, but we've seen where prisoners released has really injured our communities in tragic and real ways. So, I fully supported the Attorney General. We had talked about it, especially when we had that weekend when it was really everything that we hoped would not happen had happened. And we do want the courts to really rethink. We've already reduced the prison population by more than 600 individuals, and we believe the population is at a manageable and safe level right now. We don't need to release any more. In addition, there has not been a single case of COVID in our prison system. So for a number of reasons, we believe that we should pause and really examine any of those other prisoners for release and make sure that they are not a danger to our community.
Okay, well, I see so many questions coming in also on unemployment. I want to just give you an opportunity to sort of answer in a broad way how you feel that the system is working or not working. As a reminder to folks, the director of the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations will be on tomorrow. Scott Murakami will join us to get in the weeds and the nitty-gritty on applications and all of that. But I just would like your overall take on how the system is going. There's been so much frustration with trying to get money into the pockets of people who desperately need it right now.
So, and Scott will talk more specifically, but we did look at, and part of the challenge I think you understand is that the system itself is on this old antiquated system, and we've been trying to do all kinds of technology workarounds to make it work better. You probably have seen and heard a lot of complaints about, I can't get in, I try and log in, I get bumped out, and people are trying, can't get in. So we did tune the system over the last 3 or 4 days. We tried to make lower priority other applications that run on the mainframe, and we've improved the front end. So I was at the convention center on Saturday, and people who normally would try and can't get through, we were actually able to call them and say, can you try and log on? And they were able to log on the very first attempt. And these are people who would normally try hundreds of times and be not successful. So some of the changes we've made has been effective. The system has been a lot more efficient over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we do anticipate that we'll be making significant progress, especially as you know, the cases that are not getting through at this point are really the real troublesome multiple errors, a discrepancy between what the employee has said and what the employer has said. And so these are definitely the more complex cases. And finally, the system is working better. So at least people are not struggling to log on, hundreds of times and not being successful.
Yeah, and again, we will talk more to Scott Murakami tomorrow to talk about some of the specific concerns that people are raising right now to hopefully get some of those answers. We know that we're wrapping out of time. Final question maybe in this. We know that you had made an announcement last week about the reopening of some other businesses and retail. Is there another release or anything that's going to be happening this week that we can expect, or any sort of announcement, or is it sort of kind of as standard this week, or are you guys looking to make some kind of announcement this week?
Yeah, probably not this week. It might be that we'll make an announcement that becomes effective a little bit further on in the month. So that might be possible. We're looking at that next medium risk kinds of businesses. So hairdressers and hair salons and personal spa treatment is kind of in that next range. Restaurants, I know I met with the Hawaii Restaurant Association just thinking about dine-in service in the restaurants, and can we phase that in a way that makes sense for the businesses and reduces our risk. So that's the next level of businesses that we'll be looking at. And then the real tough ones, the high-risk activities. Ryan, it's men's and women's volleyball where you have thousands and thousands of people. So sporting events, those kind of banquets, dealing with hundreds of people, that's really the high risk events, and we'll be looking at those much, much further down the line.
All right, Governor Ige, thank you so much for taking some of the viewers' questions and for taking time to join us here today. Aloha.
Aloha. Thanks, Yanji.
Thank you so much. Always good to see you. Thank you, Governor. Well, interesting to hear. I saw some questions coming in late, and please go back and watch at the beginning because he did answer a lot of this. When it comes to the inter-island travel specifically, he said the time frame is the next 2 to 6 weeks to look at lifting that, and that really gives an opportunity to kind of test how movement among the islands impacts the spread of this disease, and also talking about beaches and gatherings of 10 people or less, because right now we do see people sort of starting to edge out, but really we are supposed to just be congregating within our own household.
Yeah, and I think it's causing some of this social tension, as we were saying, out there, because some people are abiding by the rules and they're not going out and they're not going into the, going to the beaches while others are. And it's sort of causing this tension. And so we saw the images of what it looked like over the weekend with Mother's Day happening and a lot of people gathering. So he's saying that will sort of be in that next phase, that 10 or less will sort of be the next group. I also thought it was interesting to note how the state will be looking at taking photos of these visitors that are coming in to sort of track them. That's something that I don't think I have heard yet, but something that they are looking to possibly begin doing to really make sure that they're holding some of these visitors that are arriving accountable to that 14-day quarantine period, which again looks like for travelers coming into the state will be happening for a long time now, for the foreseeable future, until Hawaii can sort of figure out that next step forward in slowly reopening tourism.
Yeah, and there's a real logistical piece to this because we are, of course, used to TSA. We're used to interacting with the ticket agents, but remember that none of those people actually work for the state of Hawaii. So there's a question of who takes the temperature, who takes that photograph. Is there another gate that has to be put in place, and how that all works? And of course, there are legal questions about privacy, and so there's a myriad of things that need to be put in place to make something like that operational. Also interesting to hear the governor say that he's been talking to the Chief Justice and trying to figure out on making sort of a standardized fine system. I thought that was already in place, but it sounds like it's sort of a hodgepodge of regulation. So that needs to be standardized so that, like he was saying, $2,000 for the first offense and so on.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see sort of what happens. And again, a lot of decisions and some of the policies that are going to be implemented are happening right now with the legislature back in session today, trying to find a way to fill the hole and sort of find a way to recover all these things that are happening. We'll be talking to members of the Hawaii House as well in a few weeks as well to kind of get an update on this special session and the things that are sort of coming up there. Also, we encourage you to head over to the SAR Advertiser. There's an article today about the future of the economy. We talked a little bit to the governor about the diversification of Hawaii's industries, and with the reliance on tourism, we've heard the governor say relooking and thinking of a different type of visitor to Hawaii. So maybe it isn't the visitor that will travel here but not spend as much money. Maybe it is a higher clientele that we could possibly be positioning Hawaii to sort of reduce the number of visitors coming in. The article in today's paper sort of dives into that and talks a little bit more about what those look like. So we encourage you to head on off to the paper to get more updates, of course, of what's happening, but also to see what officials are saying about ways where we can diversify our economy.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at some of the comments. It's hard to keep track of the comments and talk at the same time. But, Michelle, I see your point there. Taking photos and tracking people is a civil rights violation. How is no one concerned about this? That's a big concern, I think. And, balancing civil liberties with public safety and public health. Surely there will be a lot of people who agree with Michelle, but on the other side, and she's saying stop focusing on the quarantine, work on contact tracing and opening up the state. Well, we are looking forward to having Dr. Sarah Park on this program in the coming weeks, and she's the state epidemiologist. She's agreed to come on, and so we'll be talking to her about how contact tracing and how testing might be a big part of Hawaii's future going forward. So we've got a lot to talk about coming up. There's a lot of information in the paper today talking about the visitor industry and people concerned that visitors are exploiting what they see as quarantine loopholes. Another interesting article about luxury homeowners associations trying to tap into federal aids. There was this real rush to get the PPP money. That's the payroll protection program that a lot of companies tried to get money from. So there might be some people actually giving that money back, realizing that if they did take it, they'll be facing loan interest or penalties.
Yeah, so we'll see how they sort of enforce some of those loans that were adjusted. But again, we know that there's a lot of questions out there, specifically, again, with unemployment. And so we will be talking to Scott Murakami tomorrow So we encourage you to keep typing in those questions. We'll get to as many as we can tomorrow. But if you have a specific question about unemployment, please enter it in, and we will try our best to sort of navigate and get through as many as we can. We always like to end our show by addressing and talking about some of the heroes in our community. And we are seeing, again, many efforts being helped and being needed for those just feeding people. And yet another one happened this weekend, a great result over on the North Shore.
That's right. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints held, and we'll just squeeze to the side so you can actually enjoy the photograph there, along with the Salvation Army, handed out Mother's Day packets. They included 10 pounds of meat, including sirloin steak and chicken, candy for the keiki, and all, along with crafts that kids could make to give them something for Mother's Day, and a Mother's Day rose. So we really want to mahalo the Salvation Army and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for extending that aloha. They gave so many packages, enough to make, providing enough food at 4 locations, not just on the North Shore, but also Maui, here on the Big Island in Kona, and Hilo, handing out enough food to make 12,000 meals. So that is a real significant show of support, and we appreciate all that they did this weekend.
That's why we want to thank them. And again, if you have a Hawaii hero, someone that's doing good in the community, please also put in the comments and let us know who someone might be that would like to be, that you would like to be recognized for their contributions in helping all of us get through this very tough times, because we know that a lot of people continue to struggle, and we want to, of course, bring you the information, but we also want to recognize those who are helping our community as well.
Yeah, if you are in need, remember that the Hawaii Food Bank is leading up a lot of these food distributions as well. You can always visit their website, hawaiifoodbank.org, to get more information about the next place where you can go and pick up some of this food. We don't want anyone in this community to go without resources, and they are doing a tremendous job. We always salute them. So if you need help, again, hawaiifoodbank.org. Tomorrow, as Ryan said, we've got Scott Murakami on, so bring your unemployment questions to him. After that, Dr. James Baharal from Hawaii Pacific Health will be joining us on Wednesday. We got another Ask the Doctor segment. And then on Thursday, parents, listen up. Dr. Christina Kishimoto is going to be joining us. She's going to be talking to us about what the DOE is planning going forward. We heard from her a few weeks back. That was one of our most popular episodes. I know a lot of parents are very concerned. And then we heard from Corey Rosenlee about the teachers' concerns. So we want to ask her about some of those as well. So we really look forward to talking to Dr. Kishimoto on Thursday.
That's right. But until then, we want to thank you again, once again, for tuning in. We want to thank also our sponsors, the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Hawaii Pacific Health, for making this conversation possible. And again, as always, stay safe and continue to show a little aloha out there as we navigate through these uncertain times together. But until tomorrow at 10:30, we will see you then, and aloha.
Stay safe.